a philosophical and chemical treatise, called The Little Farmer, on the materia and recognition of the one and true great universal subject and his preparation. There is an old saying or common proverbium among Germans, after much tears great joy, after the rain the fine weather. That's how it happened to me a short time ago. There are others who started almost like that without any real reason or foundation, as I will tell you after the length. Then, since I thought I had the whole world in my hands, I was overcome with less and nothing. Since I put my glass in it, I now placed my welfare in it with a great impact, the materials shattered, my courage philosophos and books were sprinkled on me now and then with great damage and disadvantage, of which I now have to mention more. But I was so stunned by this unexpected misfortune and frightened that I didn't know where I was, what I was planning to do and what I should do next because of the sadness and sorrow. Then all my friends' lust and delight had transmuted and changed into pure poison and bitter salsen and not into gold and silver, as I had hoped. As I now came to myself a little, I first considered my great disadvantage and harm to the same with bent knees, hot toes and hearty sighs to complain and present to the one who lives there from eternity to eternity. Then God gives and takes it as he pleases and to whom he wants, earnestly asking that he would take care of me now and have mercy so that he could lead me the right way to the mirror of his majesty through the spirit of truth and whiteness and wise will. I am also comforted by the fact that Dionysius Sicarius says that even most philosophers were wrong in the beginning and yet finally come to a happy and profitable end. As I had now been troubled for a long time with these sad thoughts, I feel that this doubtful question remains, whether Almighty God will also give and let the poor sinners who we now live in these last and evil times share and let them know. After many considerations and movements, I finally decided on such a sentence that the very same people who had this mystery before us were also sinners and did not achieve it out of merit but out of grace. This is how one who behaved piously and had God before his eyes could do it just as well as they did out of grace from the one they love, having God and becoming powerful. Because of this I gained courage to attack my philosophos, Mugos and Mudos active Daffer and especially the graven von Treatise. Then even if I had read it diligently beforehand, I couldn't see any certain reason for it. But now there they are at the time of revelation and I read it to the same place where the material was described. It appears as if a tiny spark or ray from the place in it would bring out the power of the work. At first I was frightened, but as I looked, the eyes of my mind were opened and I could see that I was blind before and that I had reconciled for so long, but now I can see and understand. Please thank me very much for that and thank God with a heartfelt request that he will continue with me teach through whatever means I want to achieve, created by high intellect. For this reason, tell me to travel to the material soon, if I have found it everywhere, so that I want to get the closer and not remotely then one is richer than the other as they shoot at a target like Georgius Ripley in his Axioms of the 12 Gates, also Nicholas Flamel Folio 120, item folio 150. In fine, explain his words. This, in fact, is first of all very secret, from why it should be made closer to the mineral. As I was on the way and my heart was full of thoughts, it happened that between two mountains I met a fine old farmer who was dressed with a grey coat or coat on his hat, he had a black tie on his neck, a white standard and a yellow one straps around his body and red boots on his feet. After I greeted him and came closer to him, I noticed that he had 2 star liquid flowers with 7 rays in his hand, one white and the other red. Looking at them, then they were very beautiful, shiny in color, lovely in smell and sweet in taste. In addition, the one female was the other male, but both grew from one root and influentia of all planets. I asked the farmer what he thought he would do with these flowers, then I asked them all, but I didn't know that they had separate opinion and that as a man and a woman they were of 2 different natures. He looked at me seriously as to who was talking to me. The highest people in this world were then directed to this unusual place, but it is closed and sealed from them. But when I told him my wonderful course of life, about which I had previously reported something, he laughed and spoke to me in a friendly manner and said, "You should know that no one comes to know these 2 flowers, he is then predestined to do so and bring it about through his fervent prayer, strong, firm faith, and will not be given to him without great effort, care and tribulation, as you yourself will then confess." And this is precisely so that those who have it will remember it and learn to hold such a mystery all the higher and more secretly. But because you have now come this far, I will show you by the permission of the divine deity, and accept that these two flowers will only become the material prima of all metals after their conjunction and not before. Count Bernard Trevisan reads about this almost at the end of the other part of his book. There he calls these flowers a red man and a white woman. But the philosophers have always written about the materia prima, except for very serious reasons, in order to hide its roots from the unwise, and have remained completely silent about the second matter. Since you take the second material, which is cruda and raw and the very subject of the stone, in your hand and pull it out, woman and man. Only then when joined does it become prima materia, which I hereby honestly reveal to you. I was amazed at what he said and was also happy that he agreed with me on many points. He then continued to say to him, my friend, I did not look for such high whiteness in you, who are so bad and simple to look at. He smiled and said, it is precisely because of this that the whole world goes astray and misses me. Then my outwardly small stature generally deceived them. But when they could ask and kindly take off my old grey tunic, as you probably know, they would have a shiny diamond armor underneath and rubies for a shirt find, but the Most High has sealed this from their many so that they do not have to think about where all metal come from and have their origin. I answer, my dear friend, these flowers have a wonderful shine and are already medicinal. He says they are probably medicinal, but their greatest power is still hidden within them, otherwise when they are still in the root they are very poisonous. That's why the roots must first be slowly and even gently sublimated. You know the sublimation of philosophers earlier, otherwise I would have taken them, without foreign sharp things that spoil their growing strength and nature, otherwise they are of no use. Then these two beautiful flowers grow differently out of this poisonous mountain without doing anything else. And if I didn't know, he says, under which planet the farmer were constellated, then I wouldn't have come to this wonderful place and I wouldn't have gotten to know such secrets. Believe me, I'm sure. I continued my conversation, my dear friend, you tell me about strange things. Please also tell me whether these two flowers suddenly grow at the same time or what kind of shape does it have. Then I think there is most of the art in this point. But I also hold the resolution very highly because the philosophers don't say much about it. When I said this, he, the farmer, shook his head and fell silent because he finally spoke up and said, as I see it, you are very interested in these things, but I won't hide that from you at all, but let me read my varied report this time, then be content with this being the cornerstone that most people object to. There are many of you who know the verum material, but this handle is hidden from them. But come here again tomorrow at this time, I will also be here and reveal to you, teach and make known to you as much as is given to me. I thanked him for his faithful report to the highest degree and said goodbye to him the following day with great desire. I didn't delay but found myself again in time at the place where farmer was already there and had both flowers in his hand. I wished all was well with him and reminded him of his promise from yesterday, with a promise that I knew what he wanted to do for his service and I wanted everything to fall to him. He answered that he knew how to remember this and also wanted to fulfill his promise, but I could not serve him anywhere, he says, but I should know when I was comfortable with God, then he would also be my friend, if not, he would be mine enemy. Then he would have to follow his highest command and be obedient, and I should leave it at that. He continued, listen, you child of man. Now I want to repeat my speech from the beginning and tell you the entire process with all the requirements and circumstances and teach you, but you must pay attention to it, and my word will be heard at home after you have prayed well and often. If my opinion hides in your senses without knowing it and leads you away in vain and erroneous ways, then it is a gift from God the Most High. Believe me for sure. And now listen, let's sit down on this green one. Then I'm old and cold by nature. I also have damage to my legs, so I can't stand for long. I also like to rest in the green. You have undoubtedly read that our magi, philosophy and regis write and shout, according to nature, according to nature. Know from this that anyone who wants to bring something forward in this art first of all knows and understands the origin and birth of all metals, the difference between friendship and enmity, and further understand all metals grow from one root and their initial material is the same and differs only in that one thing is purer than the other is also more cooked and digested. That everything is written and shown in all philosophical books in which the truth alone is and not in the written vagabond false recipes or processes that you can safely believe. Anyone who wants to know the reason and foundation of these causes should not be annoyed by reading them. For he who wishes to feel an advantage must also feel a burden. It would be far too long for me to tell them. And once I have fully reported it to you, you will not see me again and discuss it until you have finished the work. Then I want to talk to you in a much friendlier way. At the same time, you will know me much better, love me more fiercely and hold me in higher honor than now, and we won't be divorced so soon after that, so that's enough of that for now. Furthermore, you should also be aware that whoever understands the origin of metals will also know that the material of our stone must be metallic. But it is not a metal nor a minera, but metalla and mineri, and mineri and metalla. Then of all their kind and nature is in one thing that is called electrum is an immature mineral, magnesia, or lunaria. That is why the philosophs always need plurality, such as metalla, metallorum, metallis, etc. I don't have to report it more clearly, it's also unnecessary because you already know the material, otherwise many people would like to hear it, then there are a lot of tempters around this mountain. Some of them come very close, some of them even come up, but I don't let them easily see me and the flowers, I will then be ordered to do so. This mineral root must be gradually separated from its bad nature, which it receives from poisonous vapors, as already mentioned, and then the white mercurial lily juice is pressed from it, which is very tender and fleeting because of this, to be found in its upper part and its name is azot, or the glue of the eagle. The sulfuric non-combustible fixed red lilies you will not fail to look for in the bottom and are called Layton or Leo rubeus, a red lion. There you now have my explanation according to your desire, don't ask any further, then explaining such things is highly bound and forbidden to me, therefore, pray diligently and that will also be given to you. And it is particularly astonishing that these flowers never wither, and the one can transform into any shape, also loves all the planets and may never be separated from the one with which it is connected. To describe these flowers' nature's virtue and egniness is not within anyone's heart, that is what all wise men must confess. Now these two flowers stand on a sevenfold stem, as you can see, of all sorts of colors, but they are quite far apart from each other, which makes their different natures. For this reason, one must find means so that they grow together and from these two a wonderful, incorruptible and everlasting fruit springs and breaks out, which then cannot happen without the will of God. You should also know that the number of the white lily seed is very unequal to the red one which the wise have hidden very high and call it their pondus or weight. And without this point, the two lilies do not want to unite nor, at least, permissify together. The ancient Arabs write about this, always be the singular weight of the male and the plural of the female. The graph explains this in which he speaks. Earthly power, or force, acts upon what resists it, and due to the resistance, the action of the agent is extended into another material. Earthly power resisting itself, and for resistance the action of the agent in other matter is extended, do you understand that? I answer, it's a bit dark. He said, don't worry about it so much, then when you get to the growth of these two lilies you will then see for yourself, apart from their properties and nature, what you should do to him. And you need moderate heat, otherwise the seeds of the white lilies will smoke out like a vapor and all your effort and work will be in vain. I said, you have always only thought of these two lilies, but sometimes philosophers say of one thing alone, everything that the wise are looking for lies in Mercurio and Azoth. They also talk about three as sale, sulfur and Mercurio. But most of all, that it is corpus, spiritus and anima, which you don't even think about? I have to laugh at you, he said, that you don't yet understand the terminos philosophicos, or maybe you want to try me? But I want to free you from that too. When you talk about a thing it is sal metallorum, lapis philosophorum. The two I'm talking about here are corpus and anima, body and soul. The third is a couple of both, namely the spirit, which cannot see but is hidden in both and then floats on the water as you do in Moses, General I, Cap. Like to read. Let this satisfy you, but I would like to stay with both of them. Therefore, take these 2 lilies completely polished and seal them in a crystal box without any need. Put them in a mild welding bath and the white lilies will spread out widely and contain and close the red ones. But because the red is of lesser nature and is supported by the external heat, as if it also releases its hot balsam smell into the cold of the whites, thereby becoming unified, then no one wants to cede to the others and give way, making their contrary qualities grow. As you probably know, but both of them in heaven are driven back down by the wind, and so many times they become tired from the work of climbing up and down and have to rest on earth. And know that the bathroom is not governed so much that you both natures do not arise at the same time, but only one, then you will never enjoy their smell or become a part of it, so pay close attention to this remarkable operation. But because these 2 enemies now sense and notice that one cannot harm the other, they in turn unite with such love and friendship that they now desire to stay with each other forever. In this union the entire firmament of the same sun and moon moves in such a way that they are both darkened as long as it pleases the highest. After this, out of love, God Almighty creates his bow of all kinds of colors in the air as a sign that you should not doubt then. God be merciful to you and will not admit the drowning or sin of these 2. You will also see in a short time that the moon is slowly changing and will not be as black as before and will finally shine again and will be very white again, shiny and beautiful. But the sun is still hidden behind the moon, which you cannot see because of the earth. If you now have clear eyes of understanding, you will feel 4 planets in the moon, which you can change and transmute into their constant nature through the brightness of the moon. But when Sirius or Dog Star approaches the sun and the heat becomes ever greater and more intense, then the moon is darkened by the shine of the sun until it finally hides itself behind the shine of the sun, which is so annoyed because of the impurity of the other planets that he also turns white out of her anger and finally turns blood red. But because she humbles herself before him as her master, since God has ordained it, he accepts her back as a favor and makes her like him so that they always remain and rule with him in his kingdom, whom they all rejoice in, thanking and praising God the Most High after him, through which permission they are so wonderfully adorned and gifted and hope to be able to tell and use such adornments daily in praise of his divine name. Behold, now I have freed you from your doubts and I am completely hopeful that you will now understand things completely. You may thank God, my Creator and your Creator, and know this great work in the silence at home to use and promote. Bed diligently needs to be right or you won't see or find me anymore. I probably didn't know what to answer to Farmer because of my friends, but I was very grateful and asked him in a friendly way, or then there was nothing left to do here, who and whether art would now come to an end? He answers me very gently. You should know that the virtues of these 2 lilies can be expanded and renewed every 3 days, that they can increase in strength and seed themselves, and this happens when these seeds are planted and thrown into the previous soil. This will happen in the first day the darkness takes place, the next day the bright moonlight comes. On the 3rd day the abominable sun will come again and will keep this work for as long as it pleases the Most High. Precious stones and pearls also grow naturally from these flowers. But the highest thing that concerns you humans is a further knowledge of God and a long life. And if someone enjoys just a little bit of it, he will soon recover from all sicknesses and illnesses and be rid of them. But I can't tell you about their magical power and other high secrets at the moment, but when I will come to you again after completing your work, I will then tell you and send you many of the higher qualities of his virtues. For now, let this be enough for you, and my speech will be fine measure, and consider, all your desires will be abundantly resisted with God's permission. And because I have now fulfilled my command fruitfully, I must leave you again because you will remember me and await my arrival after several months. Oh, my dear brother and best friend, I says, you speak very sensibly about these high things, which is why you look at me in such a way that you don't have to be a bad farmer, even if you can already be looked at from the outside. I agree with that, so canst do also wonderfully Latin not used to the Bavarians. My tell me at which university did you learn this? Then you are very highly graded and I have never seen anything like you. The farmer began to lick dirt and said, what makes you ask such a question? I answer, that's why I would like to know whether you would have learned something like this at university. They have the true philosophium. I'm surprised, he says, what you're dreaming about. Do you mean to seek or find wisdom or philosophy in those who despise them? Certainly no. But as far as my whiteness is concerned, I had to tremble and tremble solely because of that word and command that made heaven and earth tremble. Accordingly, I was ready to say that I was adorned with gold, diamonds, emeralds, and rubies on the inside and only wore this gray smock to hide me from the powerful. Then they would try to catch me and force me around me. I continued, why don't the great gentlemen and potentates seek this philosophy in their philosophers, which they have to hold every year at the universities with a large salary? He answers, I would like to discuss this question for a long time, but they are not worth losing so much for their sake because they do not want to be educated and educated. That's why they too take the long time with their inutilibus, futilibus argumentus, and vain things rationibus nit will be able to survive. God is angry with them that they so shamefully throw their sophistical things at the youth. They always teach and to argue about goat's wool, and when the dispute comes to an end, one is as clever as the other and they all have the same, namely a great mist. For this reason, beware before their poison-loving fantasies and give in. They talk about the nut and don't know that there is a kernel inside. The best thing is that they teach the young people the speaking skills, or rather grammar, bringing in the rest of everything else. When they were not doctors or magister, they still practiced true philosophy, but now they are ashamed of the fact that because they are graduated people they are still supposed to learn. That is why the vera philosophia, true philosophy, must be innocently condemned and persecuted under the appearance of falsehood. But so it must happen that God's whiteness before the world is called folly and a contra. For God did not without severe judgment want wisdom to be revealed under the name of stupidity, so that of course the mystery of his virtue was arcane. But in the end our good cause will triumph. And we respect her much less than they think. We can also give up on her much before she can. I said, my dear farmer, I really like you. I would also like to confess that I am of the same opinion. Then I tell you with absolute truth that outside of the university I learned a lot more from these pseudo-philosophers who I also found very repugnant. My farmer says there is enough of that, then the matter is too small. In addition, I will soon have time to return to my previous place. Now, my dear brother, you won't be leaving me, I said, but only if you kindly ask me to ask you one more question, then I'll be happy to be content, as I'm very grateful for everything. My can be. I don't know, he says. It could be such a question that I defended you. It could also be the case that they were now forbidden to reveal it to me, but tell me, the wise philosophers, I said, all right, that great art is in the government of the few, since the same should be kept unequal, and then I would also like to know which one's close or next materia of the stone were from it a specific form, or which should or could extract both flowers. Even though I know a general material, I am still uncertain about the previous point. Then Klanger writes that hardly a lot other than a whole pound can be extracted that can do the work. That would be very little, but I consider it to be that quite a few pounds worth of white and red can be prepared. He replies, I can see what that thing is. You want to know too much and don't want to search and work yourself. No, my brother, nothing will happen. It's called lilium inter spines, a lily among thorns. Whenever you think it would be easy to break it, you end up tearing or cutting your hand. That's why you have to first carefully clear away the thorns with diligence and work, and then carefully handle the beautiful lilies so that you can finally enjoy them. So you mix two questions together and only ask for one. But I would like to tell you this, that you should look at the 4 parts of the year and then divide your work from this, and then treat the wise books sufficiently. You will also see that it is hotter in summer days than in spring, colder in winter than in summer. Some people here will reason that the children probably know this. My companion, you don't yet know what winter and summer are for philosophers. Just don't run too fast before you come. If I have enough time, I can't tell you any more about this. And since you should be missing there first, which will hardly happen, I will now teach you a means so that you can make ample compensation for your damages and get your food in the meantime. See, under this gray skirt I have a green-red undergarment. When you pallet it with fire stones, note well. The Tyrolean text has fire and a red fig eagle, then your green undergarment becomes much more splendid. Lower the loosely into the pure moonshine and it will become mon of the sun 6. Loth borrow and receive them as food and give them to you. And you can enjoy this almost every 8 days. If you think about it, a great gentleman could get plenty of it if it were pushed hard, and it doesn't cost much either. You want to keep this secret and be grateful to God. Now goodbye. And as he told me, he jumped into the mountain, but both flowers were in the same place where the farmer had gone in. I tried to break them, but they moved back and forth from my hand, and as I wanted to grab them quickly, I saw a piece weighing several pounds of raw and real stones lying in front of me in their place, and a voice came from the mountain saying, "God sells his good works." After this I heard and saw nothing more. I would then fall down on my knees, thank God, and praise the one who lives there from eternity to eternity, who is whiteness itself, that he would fill and enlighten my heart's mind and courage with the spirit of whiteness, so that I could share in such high and valuable treasure become. I also promised and vowed to make good and best use of the Christian churches in honor of his holy name, and especially to use my neighbor dearly in the best possible way. So you have now received my love, the true foundation, with all the necessary circumstances of the high and valuable treasure in abundance. Do him good for him, as I do. Avoid God for eyes. Sophists have God for eyes, then you will not so often work in vain, but you will noticeably see and feel his miracles, whose name be praised and blessed from eternity to eternity. Amen. The second part of Little Farmer. After I now trust the eternal God, the only mighty God, and Schöpfer, thanked and praised from the bottom of his heart for his gracious revelation, then I call my materiam secundum to me, prima materia will come later, kiss it in front of friends as the thing for which I had so heartily longed, and for what sake I, having stood in doubt, sadness, and sorrow for many a year, I probably looked at it with great astonishment, especially because it had no external appearance and was supposed to be able to carry out and accomplish such a high, important, and supernatural work. Then it occurred to me that Farmer had said that God did this for very important reasons, including that the poor wanted it to be as good as the rich, and that they did not have to complain about this against God, as if God were to include the rich in this, have given preference. No, the rich do not respect him and are much less likely to believe that there is something like that in him, like in the Rosario Magno folios 248. Can be read, if we called our matter by its own name, the foolish and the rich would not believe it to be, the poor also get it before the rich. Now that I had wrapped and stored my materials, I went back home with my friends and sang this little song on the way, Cap. 7th Sab Salem. Where is a God other than our God? Who can help out of every need? I was sad, now I'm happy. I hadn't been home long before I decided to prepare a small amount of the expenses of the particular that the kind farmer's man taught me, so that I could wait for the Universalis with better rest and activity. Therefore, in God's name, I started by buying a small supply of coal, because it doesn't take a lot of coal, building official furnaces and stoves for this purpose, and making a small supply in a short time. The Christian enemy could not suffer such a thing by inciting one noise about the other. The neighbors complained that I would set fire to their houses. My friends and other acquaintances are throwing false coins at me for the fact that there are false coins. I should refrain from such vain pretense, so that I would not come into suspicion, and should rather keep my legal capacity, because I was Dr. Uris with serious business, and so worn I will miss my plenty of food can have this well. But whether that means I'm with good things, unfortunately, I doubt that my conscience could earn my bread. The worst thing was that the common blacksmiths and gold workers sued me in front of the council because I used the coal for them. They could not have their craft and common food, and therefore as a consequence they could not give the council and common people any interest or money. Then I paid for the coal with it I just wanted in front of them. They went to great lengths so that the council would prohibit me from doing this and also report that I should give up tractation carbonum and behave according to my calling. In sum, there was so much that I had to tear down my ovens and move away and look for a good friend who would support me with such money so that I could wait for the universal all the more calmly, but I didn't tell anyone what I had in mind. The same tribulations with Reichsen and other inconveniences resisted almost until the 3rd year. God knows how much it bothered me that I knew everything and then couldn't resort to the work, thinking back and forth, maybe God doesn't want it or allow it yet. That's why we're hunting, retro-hunting, and we're still looking. As Graf v. Treatise also testifies, he had the complete science of the universal 2 years previously and then he did not put it into practice because of many impediments and obstacles. On my trip I conferred with learned people and became more and more intelligent, traditional mutuas operas with arts and sciences as it usually happens. I also collect beautiful materials from all sorts of ores and hand stones. But I found very few of them, not more than 3, who followed the right philosophical path. They all wanted to have something to do with Mercurio Vulgi and Sol Antimonio, and Zinnober as well as many lesser and insignificant things. Then they were all wrong because they did not work and follow nature, but if they followed nature, they would not have been so miserably wrong. In addition, such a high gift is not given to everyone, so everyone can do their own calculations and examine themselves carefully before the damage can hurt and sneak up on them. Anyone who can notice will notice how I had now completed the course of the journey is the 2nd deadline I returned happily Anheims, then my supposed friend soon turned up again and wanted to know where I had been for so long, what I had done and what I wanted to do next. I gave them a short message, isn't the world big enough? Do you perhaps think that the whole world is in your place and that you cannot survive without it? But if you tried something, you would judge it much differently. There are enough people, praise God, to accept and recognize with great gratitude what you despise and laugh at. And if you also know that I won't burden you much with the tracting of the coal, then I don't need it now. At my speech they were astonished and raised their heads together, but they didn't know where Haas was buried. I went to them completely and idly, renting a house that only had one boy, and after full thanksgiving, I called my resolution with great desire for the hand and did not let up until I completed it, which is almost the first and most difficult part of the whole work. For here lies much slowness, as the philosophy all right and is the key to art. And this can easily be hardened and burned with the fire, so that the flowers or the growing strength do not fade or burn. That's why I had to be very careful, so that I wouldn't be harmed by his bad behavior, as Theophrastus writes in his manual. But in the end, by God's will, everything turned out well for me. As soon as the poisonous vapor had left the stone, both of us saw the flowers of the farmer, which the farmer said, came here very slowly, but I became more aware of the white one, the red one was not yet graded. I took a leaf from the white one and tasted it. I put the rest of the leaves on a hot tray, where it flowed quickly and smoked everything in continence, and I realized that it was the woman because it was so fleeting and volatile. I therefore also needed great foresight so that I could master the red lilies next to it, which neither pays attention to anything nor flees, but constantly rules over the flowers. But before I got hold of these 2 lilies I had quite a bit of annoyance, which I don't want to report here. But it happened soon after I got both lilies. I forgot about Farmer and was amazed at his high, ingenious mind. I continued to follow his lessons and put these 2 lilies together in a nice, friendly way. I also heard a noticeable thing. So I carefully put them all in a nice, crystal clear container without a lot of heat. As the sun begins to appear, the white lilies spread out as if they were a little water, like the taw of the morning standing on the grass, or like a delicate tear in the eye, bright as the clear moonshine but with the reflection a little bluish. And when I looked closely, I saw that she had grasped the red flowers in her and swallowed them so that I couldn't see a single leaf of them, but she couldn't hide herself in the length. Then the red lilies are hotter and the white ones are colder and wetter nature, and since the external sunshine came to her aid from the red ones, she tried to do something against it, but it was not because of the strength of the white ones or whose nature still reigns now, but they argued, they both grew slowly. at the same time into the sky but were caught by the whirlwinds in turn. It was driven down and it lasted so long that both of them had to be connected together, because their growing roots were lost, and stay together. Then first it is prima materia lapidus et metallorum, the first material is stone and metal. After that, the eclipse gradually began to appear and sun and moon became darker and blacker. That would be a similar time to reading from G. Bernardo. In the meantime, a sign of grace appears, a rainbow with all sorts of wonderful colors, of which the farmer says it would be a sign of joy and a presumption of a good end. But now that the moonlight was a bit bright, the sun began to shine hotter until the moon became full and shone translucently clear, as if there were a few pearls and roughly cut diamonds. For planets were happy then they could pass through them away from all their naughtiness in the luny glance, and nature are transformed. This is what the Count calls in his parable of King's Hemd. Since I now applied the third degree of fire, all sorts of wonderful fruits from quinces, lemons, and bitter oranges grew, lovely to look at, from a hyacinthian soil which in a short time turned into red, lovely paradise apples growing out of ruby soil and finally turned and songulated into the wonderful bright and always shining carfuncle stone which makes all dark and dark-colored planets illuminating and shining with its own shine, and all this in a very short time. As I have now done several projections over many pounds of purified metals and am now delighted with the masses and astonished that such a small quantity of our stone should have such a great power to pass through and change all kinds of metals in continents, namely 1 part in 1,000 parts. Therefore, after praying and saying thanks, I sat down and was willing to do another projection if I wanted to get closer to the foundation of the projection. And just as I was about to start, I saw my old dear little boy come back to me and greet me in a friendly way. I froze at first because I didn't know him so soon. Then he suddenly came onto my hand and was now dressed in a tied skirt with all sorts of colors. I sank down on the bench and my legs were shaking. He said with a laughing mouth and a friendly gesture, "Don't be afraid, my dear brother, you have a merciful God to do whatever your heart desires on this earth. I now come to you again as I promised to continue to inform you about these and other higher and strange things secretus, then this is just the beginning, and to teach you thoroughly. Therefore, continue to understand that it is a small, bad thing, as you yourself must now confess, to make the lapidem which the eternal God then ordains for very important reasons, but to understand this correctly and completely, all philosophers, including Adam, Solomon and Hermes, must do the same. Theophrastus should bow down and publicly confess and reveal their inability to do so in this regard. As did Zacharias, who also revealed this to Lapidem. 71. Publicly testifies speaking, our knowledge of medicine is so divine and so supernatural, in the second operation, that it has always been, and still is, impossible for this to become known to humans, regardless of their efforts or industry, even if they were, and still are, the wisest and most learned of all philosophers. For in this matter, all natural reason and experience fail. Our science of medicine is as divine as it is supernatural, in the second operation, as it has always been, and it is still impossible for men to know it, whatever their study or their energy, and they may be the wisest and most learned philosophers of all. For in this part all the natural ones fall short. System and experience, that is, our art or science is so divine and supernatural, understand according to the composition, that it has always been impossible to understand it through whatever means it might have done or could also have been and still be the wisest of them. Then at this point we all have meaning and natural reason. But so that you may continue to be established and reported in this as I promise, I want, as much as I have now granted and permitted to reveal, to thoroughly instruct and inform you. You may continue to diligently follow my instructions to the Most High with fervent prayer, then from him come all the treasures of whiteness, and then you will without a doubt be like the wise King Solomon in his Book of Whiteness in the 7th and 8th chapters. Beget enlightened and gifted with high intellect and whiteness. Then the eternal God wants to be asked for it and gladly gives it, as he has done to others before, to those who are heartily reconciled, and to use such high gifts of God in honor of his happiness, and then to use it for the good of his neighbor and the dear poverty have in mind. But because I heard that you did something unknowable with the projection of the tincture, as if it should be reported that you first purged and cleansed the metal from its adurantibus accidentibus or sulfurous impurities before you do the projection, or you will suffer harm. But how such purification takes place, such has to in the philosophical books, and this happens like this. And as he said this, he took a piece of veneris, put it in a crucible, threw a purge powder on it, and drew his stinking red, burning, disgusting sulfur with a crooked iron wire, because it often prevents the tincture from entering, like slag from it, so long Venus bit into it and the slag turned white. And when I then threw my tincture on it, it penetrated and went in an instant, and the entire corpus veneris became wonderfully good and better than natural Hungarian gold. I was very happy about this and thanked him for his report. Accordingly, he also tells me cleaning of other metals and purifications which to try in his air and was refreshment. He also reports to me, speaking further, you should also know and be understood that with the white fixed stone you can make all kinds of precious stones with such a white shine as diamonds, white sapphire, emeralds, pearls, and the like. With the yellow stone, before it becomes very red, all sorts of yellow ones like hyacinths, yellow demant topazium. With the red but carfuncle rubies, garnet, spinach, and sea, preparation which far surpass even the Orientals in nobility, virtue, and glory. I want to show you all of this myself later and show you with my hand so that it can easily be provided for. But now I want to let you see a wonderful secret nut. But first you have to close the windows and not be horrified, but rather enjoy the high nature that God has planted in it. I said, my friend and dearest brother, I would like to learn something like this and see that I can also be grateful to my Creator, then it will serve to further strengthen my faith and be useful. Sit down on the earth, and he said. Accordingly he names 7 tables, which he prepares first according to the number of the 7 planets, cleanly formed on each table of the assigned planetary character or sign, places the 7 planets on it, and names the signa one after the others, according to their special constellation as the props require. Let them flow together in a jar and let 7 drops of our oil drip into it. Then a lovely, shining, flame-like mist would flow out of the jar and cover the entire lot in such a shine that I could feel it horrified. And I certainly saw such wonderful secreta and arcana alongside the appearance of all the planets and the entire firmament that circulated around them as they walked above, which I agree is in no way befitting and wanting to be borne. I would never have believed that such miracles could be in our stone unless I had seen it myself, and it may well be that a human being can gain a celestial understanding because he can perform such majesty in dead things. My little babe also tells me great secrets about many things. How I could know how much true philosophy there is in the world today if I could let everyone know, and they would soon come and see me too. He also teaches me that if I needed 9 drops or 9 grains 9 days in a row, I would be gifted with English understanding and would appreciate being in the parade. Then I heard so much from him about the miracle that I would never have believed, sed experienta mil testes. Now, after all, he continues to say, a great and supernatural miracle, I want to show you and then tell you about many effects, and virtues of our blessed stone. Then finally all the doubtful speeches, enigmas and equivocal discourses of the philosophers, through which so many people are led around, resolve after the length and explain them to you. Ultimately, I would also like to add a number of processes so that you can understand the true reason, so that you can see that if you have first properly understood the philosophy, you can reach the end much sooner in time. And such a lack is due to the matter in the understanding of resolution or dissolution, and then also in the right composition, as you will hear. Then several philosophers created it in 378 days and in 30 days and brought it to a happier conclusion. And after he had said this he said, help me collect a large barrel of rainwater, we had it putrefied at some point. Afterwards we separated the clear blue water, the feces by cohabationum, and put it in a clean wooden open tub or bowl and placed it in the sun, and then let a drop of our blessed and unburnt oil drip into it. Then successive darkness over all the deep came, just as happened on the first day of creation. After that, 2 little drops and the dark light was immediately lost and separated. Finally, with white and the time opportunity, we have put a little drop in after everything has appeared, and here comes everything that is made and created in creation mundi, in 6 days, with all the circumstances and ineffable glories in which it is beyond my sense and reason to tell, and it is not my place to reveal such things. Hensio, says Hermes the wise king in his Tabula Smaragdina or Smaragdica, right, thus the world was created, therefore the world was created. O Lord God, I say, what a high mystery this is, sigh heartily about it, praising him who lives there from eternity to eternity. He said, you want to be happy with this dear brother now, then higher arcana will not be ordered to reveal to you this time. Bet herzlich and Feurig, when then the mandate to reveal more to you will be communicated further by me. Now we want to proceed to the previously promised things and procure the effectus and virtuts of our inexhaustible well, so that you can also do the right thing in medicinalibus and thus serve and help your neighbor, the poor and the sick. Therefore, sit down and write it down as much as you care about it. But first I want to talk about a little of the basic of 3 principles and then move on to the main points. I therefore say it this way. Just as there is one eternal Almighty God, through whom everything was and still exists, and then in the one there are 3 different persons, therefore you should also know that the same is arranged into a parable, and that all things must also exist in unity. But in the united two, one fleetingly sees the other, fixed and constant, one physically, or one white, the other red, the third but hidden and virtuously placed and ordained. From this it follows that all things that have a substance and that should be and remain good, that the same flow from one thing in likeness and divided into 3, in turn, the 3 must be composed into one, otherwise it goes against the indication of the highest and nothing useful comes of it. But the 3 are actually body, soul and spirit, or heavenly, earthly and watery, or sulfur and mercurius, and these 3 are actually one and with each other in one thing or subject, as in man, body, soul and spirit, as in God the Father, Son and Holy Spirit, also in all creatures, father, mother, children. To confirm this, God, who justifies and trusts to prove his will and how everything should be, created Adam his first son in his likeness and image, and the only human being was God's son and image, namely Adam, and not Eve, the entire human race, and not in Eve. So, from the one Adam and Son of God, you became 3 things, father, mother and children, so this is to be understood by all creatures. Then the earth was the mother of all 4-footed animals, herbs, trees, foliage and grass, and yet at first it was a single thing, namely earth, and among the earth the seeds. So God made the separation of one into 3, saying, let the earth bring forth herbaceous leaves and grass and fruitful trees, which will seed themselves and bear fruit according to their kind, multiplying according to their likeness through all their strength. So now 3 things have come into being out of the one earth, namely the earth's seeds and their fruit, which bear opposite seeds, then it becomes against one, and 3 different things in such a separation also come together in turn to that from which they sprung, namely all the fruits go and will return to the earth and will therefore return into one. Just as man, because he was taken according to the body, as God said, you are on the earth and must return to the earth. So everything or creature goes back to where it came from, namely to its first mother, and ultimately, according to its opportunity, it returns to God from whom it first came out through the Word, namely into the mystery magnum, so that all things remain in unity and exist and be maintained with one, namely with God. But whatever separates itself from this and steps outside of God's order or breaks away from it is devilish, like Lucifer through his pride, man in his crime against God's commandment, the creatures through the curse that fell on them for the sake of man's fall. But man was brought back and became one and united with God and God himself, and thus in Christ through his shedding of blood a tincture or projection was made because it was of divine nature. And God breathed a soul into the first Adam, out of his essence and being. But the same was also deceived by Satan, but, as said, brought against Christ by God and man, which cannot happen to the devil because he willfully sinned against God and cheated on God's image. God wanted to allow all of this to happen and to create his omnipotence and abundance mercy in that he wills that everything in and after his ordination should exist in eternity. That is why those who work and undertake something in this holy art against the course of nature and the ordination of the Most High God are so grossly mistaken. I understand me correctly, he goes on to say that nature needs to be changed so that out of Luna, Marte, Antimonio, and other metals soul becomes, but there has to be a separation and throwing away of which this should not enter, namely the impediment which is impure and must be rejected so that this can happen good so inside is free to appear clearly in its clarity. Then because of the curse so passed on nature by God as man feels, nature has become very corrupt, defective and frail. Whoever can take away such a deficiency and come to the aid of nature through its natural or efficient means and medicine, including the artist's plusquam perfection, so hidden especially in feces, is a real, true master and philosopher. Then each thing bears its own death and life on its neck as health and disease. And everything created by nature and properties of its own kind is healthy or sick as an example of man who is earth or limbus terrae subtilioris according to the external being, and an extract of all earthly creatures, which is why he is also called microcosm or small world and cheap. Now man mostly eats and drinks from the fruits of the earth, which is his means of illness or health. The nobler the fruits or creatures that have come from the earth from which man eats his food, the healthier he is, and the contradiction of unhealthiness remains to be understood. Now we know that no thing in nature is more closely related to the human body and that Metalla has no more certain convenience, and in fact the purest one than Sol and Luna, which shows their beautiful shine and stability, which they have against the fire which the other metals do not do. Then the Ijsen rusts away, the copper becomes a verdigris or vitriol, the lead becomes a mercury, and everything in the fire outside Sol and Luna, which exist in two, smokes up. From this it is easy to conclude that their spirit or tincture is in them decided that he has such constancy and virtue in himself and in other things. That's why these two noble metals, which, being like the human body, can infuse by nature such high health to those who use them correctly and know how to prepare them, that nothing about them can be the only threefold point of the universal path, and the herbs and roots bloom, etc., which easily spoil and become rotten and stinky and cannot be compared to metals to 1,000 degrees. But you shouldn't understand all of this literally, but rather philosophically, as you were informed and instructed by me at the beginning. From this it ultimately follows that the two noble metals as Sol and Luna, or gold and silver, where they are brought to their inner purity through the right, natural, native and philosophical preparation, compare themselves to the heavenly star as sun and moon, which illuminate with their clarity day and night the upper and lower firmament. And if all creatures would lose their light and shine, they would die and perish and could not be supported or preserved by the other planets such as Marte, Saturno, Io, Venere, Mercurio, and also other stars, fixed and unfixed, no matter how powerful they seem to be respected. You can now easily assume that the lesser five metals as Mars, Saturnus, Jupiter, Venus, Mercurius, together with all their helpers, with the exception of one, which determines all things' properties within themselves, are also all things or species in common, as they have one name, may have or always be conceived for the health of the metals or transmutation, from a lesser degree to a greater degree, or from imperfection to perfection and purity. Nothing can be done about it. Then the medicine that is used against the illnesses must always be much nobler and better than the deficiency or infirmity from which the illness arises. Therefore, if necessary, the cure or transmutation metallorum in others must not then be sought and found in the two luminaries, Sol Rubio and Luna Alba, the two lights, the red sun and the white moon, as the ancient King Hermes rightly says. As an example, the first man Adam was born by God to be a living person without any sins or illnesses, much less a dead body and soul, where he would have remained in the ordination and mandate of God. But when he did that, if the commandment was transgressed, sin and sickness of body and soul came, so that we were now more poor, miserable mortal people, subject to death and creatures, because we were previously lords and rulers, so that we were dependent on our own mother of the earth and her children, who were our brothers also of a nature, and being destroyed, consumed and ultimately even eaten. Now that we are human beings of the same kind of nature and egg creation as before, we continue to be human beings subjected to frailty and death, but we have lost many thousands of parts of perfection and can no longer be expected to be the same as any human being or similar in form to the first human being the case was. That is why primi patres or first parents of the Most High have prayed for this high medicine, as tincturam philosophorum, for the preservation of long life and resistance to all diseases, with which one can communicate such things and secrets, which I have partly revealed to you and partly still have to hide from him. It is most welcome to open. But an inexperienced person would like to throw it to you and tell you where the metal comes from, with people, animals, herbs, etc. Such a sympathy correspondence, love and friendship had flesh and bone metalla and mineralia, as far as heaven and earth stood or separated from each other in his eyes. But this can easily be refuted when one first considers the original generation of man and metal and compares them with each other. Man is not, like the unlearned theologians and clamants of mine, created from a bad, unclean or common lump of earth by God Almighty, but by the very best, subtlest extract, etc. been so in the whole center of the earth. And believe me that the Almighty did not blow and plant a sparkle or ray of his eternal essence and being for such a work, which he created in his own image, but rather, as I said, took the very extract of the whole and then gave himself the same when man resolved into its tria principia, and it is brought about that in the end a red, beautiful, shiny earth can be seen in the composition. The rest are mist, reliqua desiderantur. End of Little Farmer.